The sound came first, not a scream, not a warning, a sharp metallic crack that cut through the summer air like a gunshot. For a split second, no one at the zoo reacted. Children were still laughing, parents were still holding drinks, cameras were still pointed at enclosures frozen in the familiar comfort of a routine. Then the ground seemed to shudder, and the sound came again, louder this time. Metal tearing, bolts snapping, a barrier giving away under a force it was never meant to resist. What followed was not immediate chaos. It was something worse. Silence, the kind of silence that arrives just before terror, when the human mind hasn't yet caught up to what the body already knows. Then someone screamed. Hundreds of heads turned at once toward the lion enclosure, and in that moment, fear spread faster than sound. The steel gate hung at an unnatural angle, twisted outward like a wound forced open from the inside, and stepping through it, slowly, deliberately, was a shade that did not belong among strollers and cotton candy. A full-grown male lion. His mane was darker than the photos on the zoo signs, thick and heavy, catching the sunlight and streaks of golden shadow. His shoulders rolled as he moved, each step calm, measured, terrifyingly controlled. This was not an animal running in panic. This was a predator who knew exactly where he was. People didn't run right away. They froze, staring, trying to reconcile the impossible image in front of them with the belief that zoos are safe, that cages are absolute, that things like this only happen in movies or headlines. From faraway places, phones came up instinctively, as if recording might somehow protect them. Then the lion lifted his head and roared. It wasn't a long roar. It didn't need to be. That sound tore through the crowd and shattered the illusion in an instant. Parents grabbed children, drinks spilled, the stroller tipped over. Security radios crackled with overlapping voices shouting codes that no one seemed to fully understand. Run. That was the only word people heard. Whether it was spoken or not, the plaza erupted. Shoes scraped against concrete. A woman fell near the gift shop, twisting her ankle as others stumbled over her. A child stood frozen in the middle of the walkway, eyes wide, hands at his sides, unable to move as his parents were pushed backward by the surge of bodies. And through it all, the lion kept moving forward, not charging, not stalking, just walking his tail, swaying his head low, his eyes scanning a world that suddenly looked very small beneath them. Security guards yelled, their voices cracking with urgency. Tranquilizer rifles were being pulled from lockers too far away. Protocols were being shouted that had only ever existed on paper. Somewhere, an alarm began to wail, but it sounded thin and useless against the pounding of human fear. Most people were looking at the lion. Almost no one noticed the old man on the bench. He sat just off the main path near the trees where he had sat countless Sundays before. His back was straight, his hands resting on his knees, fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from age. His white hair was neatly combed, his coat worn but clean. He did not stand. He did not run. He watched. From 20 yards away, the lioness' amber eyes lifted and locked onto him. For a heartbeat, the chaos blurred into something distant and unreal. Screams echoed, footsteps thundered past, but between the old man and the lion, there was a stillness so complete it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. No one around them understood what they were seeing. To the crowd, it looked like the worst possible scenario: a defenseless elderly man frozen in place as a lion advanced in his direction. Some shouted at him to run. Others screamed warnings that came too late to matter. A security guard raised his weapon finger, hovering, terrified that the next second would demand an irreversible choice. The old man didn't he look away. His eyes faded, blue and clouded by years, searched the lioness face with an intensity that had nothing to do with panic. There was shock there, yes, but also something else, recognition perhaps, or memory, or a question that had waited decades to be answered. The lion stopped, not abruptly, not startled. He simply paused, his massive body, tensed muscles, coiling beneath fur that bore the quiet evidence of age scars, flecks of gray, and the mane the weight of years carried. With authority, his head tilted slightly, the way a cat might tilt its head when hearing a sound it almost remembers. The distance between them felt enormous to the people watching. To the old man it felt impossibly small. Around them, fear continued to explode outward. People believed they were witnessing the opening moments of a tragedy. Cameras zoomed in, desperate to capture what they thought would be the final seconds of a stranger-ass life. Commentators in the making whispered predictions that history had trained them to expect. Lion escapes cage. Elderly man attacked. It made sense. It fit the narrative the world already believed. No one yet understood that this story did not begin today, that it had started more than 2 decades earlier in a place far from this zoo, in a moment of quiet desperation that no one had reported, no camera had recorded, and no crowd had witnessed. The lion took one step forward. A collective gasp rippled through what remained of the crowd. The security guard tightened his grip. Somewhere, a mother covered her child's eyes. The old man finally moved, not backward, forward, just one step, slow, careful, as if approaching not a wild animal, but a memory that might disappear if he startled it. His mouth opened and his voice then, weathered, almost lost to the nose, carried across the plaza. The lioness ears flicked, and in that instant, everything people thought they understood about danger, instinct, and fear began to fracture, because what was about to happen would not look like an attack, and by the time the world realized its mistake, it would already be too late to take back the fear it had felt. Before fear turned him into the center of everyone's attention, he had spent most of his life learning how to disappear. His name was Walter Hayes, and on most days, the world passed him by without ever noticing he was there. At 72, Walter had become the kind of man people looked through rather than at. He lived alone in a narrow third-floor apartment on the north side of Chicago, close enough to hear the elevated train rattle the windows every morning at 6:12 a.m. He woke at the same time each day, not because he needed to, but because his body no longer allowed him the luxury of sleeping in. Years of physical labor had carved their presence into him, hands that trembled slightly, joints that protested, the cold shoulders that carried a permanent slope from decades of lifting things heavier than he should have. His wife had died 11 years earlier, quietly in a hospital room filled with machines that kept breathing going long after hope had left. They never had children. Friends faded the way they always do when routines change and grief becomes inconvenient. One by one, phone calls stopped, invitations slowed. Eventually, silence settled in and made itself comfortable. Walter learned how to live inside it. His days followed a careful rhythm. Coffee brewed strong and black, toast eaten standing by the sink, the newspaper read slowly, not for the news itself, but for the feeling of structure it gave him. On Tuesdays and Fridays, he walked to the small grocery store on Clark Street and bought exactly what one person needed. Nothing more, nothing that would spoil before he could finish it. Sundays were the hardest. Sundays stretch endlessly full of reminders of what other people still had. Families, Noah's purpose shared. When the walls of his apartment began to feel too close, Walter put on his old brown coat, slipped the exact change into his pocket, and took the bus north toward the zoo. The Lincoln Park Zoo had become his refuge. He bought a senior ticket, nodded politely to the same guard who never remembered him, and walked the familiar paths with unhurried steps. He knew which benches caught the best afternoon light. He knew which exhibits drew crowds and which were usually quiet. He avoided the places filled with children and lingered near the animals that seemed like him, content to observe the world from a distance. There was one bench he always returned to. It sat near the big cat enclosure, just far enough from the main flow of traffic to feel private, close enough to hear the low, ambient sounds of animals breathing, shifting, existing. Walter sat there every Sunday, hands folded in his lap, eyes fixed on the enclosure. Even when the lion wasn't visible, most people assumed he was just another lonely old man passing time. No one guessed that every visit was an act of loyalty. Walter had never told anyone the full story, not because it was dramatic, but because it hurt too much to explain. It was easier to let people believe he liked lions or zoos or fresh air. The truth was heavier. More than 20 years earlier, Walter had been a mechanic, working night shifts near the Chicago freight yards. One cold autumn evening, long past midnight, he heard a sound that didn't belong. A thin, desperate cry coming from behind stacked shipping containers. He followed it with a flashlight and found something he was never supposed to see: a lion cub barely old enough to stand, crammed into a broken crate soaked in filth, a collar cutting into its neck. Walter had known immediately that if he called the authorities, the cub would likely die in holding facilities before decisions were made, and he also knew that taking the animal home was insane. He did it anyway. For months, Walter's apartment became a sanctuary. He slept on the floor so the cub could have the bed, heat, cleaned wounds, warmed milk, learned how to move carefully around claws that grew larger every week. The lion followed him everywhere, slept pressed against his chest, purred with a force that made the furniture vibrate. For the first time since his wife's death, Walter wasn't alone. When officials finally discovered the cub, the separation was swift and brutal. The lion was transferred to the zoo for its own safety. Walter was warned, documented, dismissed. There were no goodbyes that felt complete. He told himself he had done the right thing, but some part of him never healed. Years passed. Walter moved closer to the zoo, pretending it was practical. He visited every Sunday, always at the same time, always sitting on the same bench. The lion grew into a massive male with a dark mane and a scar at the neck where a collar had once been too tight. The zoo staff noticed something odd over the years. The lion grew restless on Sundays. He paced, he watched the crowd. He waited. Walter never asked for special access. He never knocked on doors. He didn't need recognition. It was enough to sit to see, to know the lion was alive and strong and had become what Walter could never give him in that apartment. Time, however, has a way of shrinking people. Walter's steps slowed, his breath shortened, his doctor mentioned his heart more often than Walter liked to hear. Still, he came, even when it hurt, even when it took him twice as long to walk from the bus stop to the bench. On the Sunday, everything changed. Walter felt tired in a way that settled deep into his bones. The zoo was crowded, louder than usual. He considered leaving early, but something held him there, a quiet pull he couldn't explain. So he sat, and while families rushed past him, while laughter and music and footsteps filled the air, Walter faded into the background the way he always did, just an old man on a bench. No one noticed the way his eyes searched the enclosure. No one saw the faint tremor in his hands, or the careful calm in his breathing. No one understood that he was not waiting for danger, he was waiting for someone he had never stopped loving. When the metal broke and fear took over the zoo, people saw Walter as helpless. They were wrong. What they were witnessing was not a man frozen by terror, but a man standing at the crossroads of memory and meaning, a man who had already lost everything once and learned that some bonds don't weaken with time or distance, they deepen. And as the lion stepped into the open plaza, how the world braced itself for violence, Walter Hayes remained exactly where he was, not because he didn't understand the danger, but because he understood something far more powerful than fear. The truth about Walter Hayes and the lion was not a single moment of bravery, but a season of quiet choices that no one ever witnessed. Long before the lion became a symbol of fear on the evening news, before crowds screamed and guards raised their weapons, there was a night so ordinary that it nearly erased itself from memory, except for one sound that refused to be ignored. Walter had been 49 years old then, still strong enough to work double shifts, still convinced that if he kept moving, grief would never catch up with him. His wife had been gone less than a year. The apartment felt like an echo chamber of things left unsaid. So he worked late, fixing engines and loading freight near the railroad, surrounding himself with nose and grease and exhaustion. It was close to midnight when he heard it. At first he thought it was machinery, metal, scraping metal, a loose hinge, maybe a trapped raccoon. But then the sound came again, thinner, weaker, almost pleading. Walter followed it past stacked containers and puddles of oil, reflecting broken lights. The closer he got, the quieter the world seemed, as if the city itself was holding its breath. When he shined his flashlight into the gap between two crates, his knees nearly gave out. Inside a splintered wooden box lay a lion cub. The animal was so small it barely looked real. Its fur was matted with filth, its ribs pressed visibly against its skin. A cheap leather collar dug into its neck, cutting so deep that dried blood clung to the fur. The cub tried to growl, but the sound came out as a broken whimper. Walter had worked with machines his entire life. He understood force, pressure, failure points. He knew instinctively when something was close to breaking. This cub was breaking. Walter stood there longer than he should have, weighing every consequence. Calling animal control would be correct, legal, safe. It would also mean hours, maybe days, before the cub received proper care. And Walter could see it plainly in the animal's eyes. It did not have days, so he did the wrong thing. He took off his coat, wrapped the cub against his chest and carried it to his car like a secret that burned. At home, Walter transformed his tiny bathroom into an emergency shelter. He warmed towels, cleaned the wound on the cub's neck with shaking hands, whispered nonsense words just to keep the silence away. He fed it milk mixed carefully, slowly, drop by drop, afraid of doing harm. Even as he tried to save a life he had no right to touch, the cub slept pressed against him that first night, his breathing shallow but steady. Walter lay awake on the tile floor, afraid to move, afraid that if he slept, the warmth would fade and the small body would go still. It didn't. Days turned into weeks. The cub grew stronger, its eyes cleared, its appetite returned. It followed Walter from room to room, tripped over its own paws, batted at shoelaces and table legs with clumsy seriousness. When it purred, the sound was deeper than any domestic cat Walter had known, low, resonant, vibrating through his bones. Walter named him Leo because the name felt simple and honest, no grandeur, just truth. Living with a lion cub was not magical in the way stories pretend. It was terrifying, exhausting. Every moment carried risk. Walter learned how to move slowly, how to read the tension in a tail flick, how to redirect playful swats before they became dangerous. He slept lightly, ate quickly, laughed more than he had in years, and for the first time since his wife's death, he spoke aloud again. He told Leo about her, about the way she used to hum while washing dishes, about the quiet they had shared that never felt empty until it was gone. Leo listened the way animals do, without judgment, without interruption, head resting against Walter's leg, eyes half closed, purring like a steady heartbeat. The lion grew fast, too fast. By the 4th month, Leo was no longer a secret that could be hidden. He was powerful, curious, unaware of his own strength. The walls felt thinner, the risks heavier. Walter knew the truth even as he avoided saying it. This could not last. When authorities finally arrived, tipped off by a neighbor who heard unfamiliar sounds, Walter didn't resist, he didn't argue. He stood between Leo and the strangers until the veterinarian assured him the cub would be safe, that he would have space, proper care, a future. The transfer was efficient, cold, necessary. Leo was sedated, carried away behind steel and glass. Walter watched from the doorway, hands clenched so tightly his nails drew blood. The cub stirred once, eyes unfocused, and made a sound so soft it barely existed. Walter never forgot it. The zoo placement was meant to be the end of the story, a mistake corrected, a line drawn. But bonds don't dissolve because paper works as they should. Walter visited once, then again. He never asked for access, never tried to cross boundaries. He watched from behind barriers as Leo grew into his body, his man darkening, his movements sharpening into something undeniably wild. Yet every Sunday, without fail, the lion noticed him. At first it was pacing, then waiting, eventually recognition. Leo would approach the glass, sit, and hold Walter's gaze longer than coincidence could explain. The zoo staff joked about it. Visitors took photos. No one understood. They hadn't been there. In the beginning, they hadn't felt the weight of a dying cub against their chest, or the responsibility of choosing love over safety when no one was watching. Walter never tried to explain it because some truths don't need witnesses. They live quietly, patiently, waiting for the day the world is forced to look directly at them and realize it. Never understood what it was seeing at all. No one noticed the moment it truly began. Not the alarms, not the shouting, not even the sound of metal screaming as it failed. It began with Leo lifting his head. The afternoon had been ordinary in the way dangerous moments often are. Families move through the zoo with paper cups and half-listening smiles. Children press sticky hands to glass. Phones chime somewhere a street. Musician played a tune that drifted unevenly through the air. Walter Hayes sat on his usual bench, the one angled just right so the sun didn't sting his eyes, and the enclosure stayed in view without effort. His body was tired that day. 72 years sat heavily in his joints. His hands trembled slightly in his lap, not from fear, just from time. He had come anyway, he always did. Across the enclosure, Leo lay in the shade, massive and still, his dark mane rippling gently in the breeze. Age had changed him, not weakened, refined. His movements were slower now, more deliberate. A king who no longer needed to prove himself. Walter watched, not expecting anything. He never did. Expectation only made the leaving harder. That was when the sound came, a sharp crack, then another, to cling to, be thunder, to violent, to be ignored. The steel barrier near the corner of the enclosure buckled inward with a groan that seemed to vibrate through bone. For a heartbeat, the crowd froze, confused by the unfamiliar shape of disaster. Then the fence gave way completely. Screams detonated across the courtyard. People ran without direction. Strollers tipped. A child fell. Security radios erupted into panic static. Somewhere, someone shouted to get down, to move to hide. And Leo stepped through the broken steel. He didn't charge at first. He emerged with the calm authority of a creature that knew exactly who he was. His paws touched the concrete. His muscles rolled beneath his coat. His mane caught the sunlight like fire. The distance between predator and people vanished in seconds, not because Leo ran, but because panic collapsed space. Walter did not stand. He remained seated on the bench, his heart pounding, not with fear, but with something heavier. Recognition, certainty, the same strange stillness he had felt decades earlier in a bathroom lit by a single bulb holding a dying cub against his chest. Leo turned his head. His eyes swept the chaos, running bodies, raised weapons, screaming mouths. His tail lashed once, twice. Confusion flickered through his posture. This was not his territory. This was not his world. Then his gaze locked onto Walter. Everything else fell away. The lion stiffened, his ears angled forward. His breathing changed. A low sound rolled through his chest. Not a roar, not a growl, but something unfinished, as if memory had struck him. Mid-thought, Walter stood. His legs protested. Pain shot through his knees. He ignored it. "Leo," he said. His voice was thin, old, almost lost beneath the noise, but it carried. Leo's body shifted instantly. He began to run. Gas ripped through the crowd. A security guard raised a tranquilizer rifle. Finger tightening, someone screamed Walter's name, though Walter never learned who knew it. The lion closed the distance with terrifying speed. Each stride 8 meters of concrete. Dust kicked up beneath his paws. The ground seemed to recoil from him. Walter did not move. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to turn, to flee. He did none of it. He stood exactly where he was, arms loose at his sides, eyes locked on the animal charging toward him. "Easy," he whispered. "Easy, my boy. 10 meters, 5. The guard hesitated. The shot did not come. Leo skidded to a stop, inches from Walter's claws scraping. Concrete muscles coiled so tight they trembled, his breath blasted warm against the old man's chest. His eyes, those unmistakable amber eyes, searched Walter's face with fierce urgency. For a single suspended second, the world held its breath. Then Leo leaned forward, not to strike, to press his head against Walter's chest. The impact nearly knocked Walter backward. He stumbled, but the lion adjusted instantly, bracing him with his body, supporting him with a gentleness that defied the laws of nature and expectation. A deep, thunderous purr erupted from Leo's chest, so powerful it seemed to vibrate the air itself. Walter laughed once, broken, wet, disbelieving, and lifted his trembling hands into Leo's mane. "I know," he murmured. "I know." Leo rubbed against him again, marking him, anchoring him, purring louder, his massive tail swaying like an uncontained emotion. He licked Walter's cheek with a rough, familiar swipe, wiping away tears Walter had and he realized were falling. Around them, the chaos collapsed into silence. Weapons lowered, radios went quiet. People stared, mouths open, phones forgotten in their hands. No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. This was not an attack. This was a reunion. Leo circled Walter once, slow and deliberate, then sat heavily at his feet, like he had done as a cub, placing his enormous head against Walter's thigh. His posture was relaxed, open, trusting. Walter lowered himself with difficulty onto the concrete beside him, ignoring the pain, one hand buried deep in the lioness mane. "I am here," he said softly. "I never stop coming." Leo's eyes half closed. He blinked slowly, the unmistakable sign of feline peace, and exhaled. Only then did the keepers move. They approached carefully, voices low, movements respectful. Walter spoke too. Leo, the entire time steady and calm, guiding him back toward the enclosure as if they were simply taking another Sunday walk. Leo followed, not because he was forced, because Walter asked. When the reinforced gates finally closed and the danger passed, the crowd exhaled as one. Some cried, some applauded, some stood frozen, unsure how to process what they had just witnessed. Walter remained seated on the ground long after his hand resting against the fence where Leo had disappeared, his body shaking not from fear, but from the weight of a truth the world had just seen and could no longer deny. Love once given is not forgotten, not by time, not by distance, not even by a lion running full speed through a world that told him he should never remember. By evening, the zoo had returned to something that looked like normal, but nothing about it felt the same. The broken fence had been secured with temporary steel panels. The emergency crews had gone. Families drifted home carrying stories they would repeat for the rest of their lives. Their voices hushed as if speaking too loudly might break whatever fragile meaning had settled over the place. News vans lined the street outside the gates. Headlines were already forming in the glow of phone screens. Lion escapes enclosure, elderly man survives close encounter, miracle at the zoo. None of them were quite right. Walter Hayes sat alone in a small medical room. Behind the scenes, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He didn't remember accepting. A nurse checked his blood pressure twice, frowning with professional concern. Someone asked if he was in shock. Walter shook his head slowly. Shock was loud. This was something else. Quiet, heavy, still unfolding inside him. Across the facility, Leo rested in the inner enclosure, separated from the public now watched by keepers who spoke in whispers. He had eaten, he had drunk water, he had paced once, then settled. Every so often, he lifted his head and looked toward the direction where Walter had been taken, his tail flicking gently, his body calm. "He is fine," one keeper said almost to himself, "calmer than I've ever seen him after stress." No one argued. The footage spread faster than anyone could contain it. The moment Leo ran, the moment he stopped, the moment his head pressed into the chest of a trembling old man who refused to step away, millions watched it slowed down, analyzed frame by frame, overlaid with captions and speculations. Some called it reckless, others called it irresponsible. A few said it proved wild. Animals could never be trusted. But most people saw something else. They saw recognition. They saw memory. They saw a bond that didn't fit into the boxes people were comfortable with. By the next morning, reporters wanted interviews. Officials wanted statements. Lawyers wanted clarity. Zoo administrators met behind closed doors, replaying the incident not just as a safety failure, but as an ethical one. The fence had failed, yes, but something else had been revealed that could not be welded shut. When Walter was finally allowed to leave, he didn't go home. He asked quietly if he could sit near the enclosure again. Not inside, not closed, just where he always sat. The request was granted without discussion. Leo came to the fence within minutes of seeing him. He didn't press against it this time. He simply lay down, placing his massive head on his paws, facing Walter, as if the distance itself no longer mattered. People watching from afar cried openly. Later that afternoon, the zoo released a statement. It spoke of enhanced safety measures, internal reviews, and protocols moving forward. Buried near the end was a single sentence that would be quoted far less than it deserved. "There is no evidence of aggressive intent toward Mr. Hayes at any point during the incident." That sentence changed everything. Walter was offered private visits after hours. He declined at first. He had never needed more than Sundays, but the keepers insisted, not out of pity, but respect. They had seen something that day that changed how they understood the animal. They cared for the man who had quietly loved him from the other side of the fence for decades. The public learned more slowly. They learned that Leo had not always been a lion behind glass, that he had once been small enough to fit in a menace's arms, sick and abandoned, found in a place where life was cheap and survival uncertain. They learned that Walter had kept him alive through nights of fear and exhaustion, then let him go when loving him meant doing so. They learned that Walter had returned every Sunday for 22 years, asking for nothing, never reaching past the boundary, never expecting recognition, and they learned that Leo had remembered anyway. Scientists debated it. Comment sections exploded. People argued about anthropomorphism and instinct and projection. But none of the debates could erase what millions had seen with their own eyes: a predator who did not attack when every assumption said he would, and a man who did not run because some part of him knew he didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, something shifted in how people spoke about animals like Leo. Less about dominance, less about control, more about responsibility, about the quiet, invisible ways humans shape the inner worlds of the creatures they touch. Even briefly, Walter never sought attention. When asked how he felt about becoming a symbol, he smiled faintly and said he wasn't one. He was just a man who had once done what he thought was right and kept showing up afterward. Love doesn't expire, he told the reporter who caught him on his way out one evening. It just waits. Leo's routine changed, too. He grew more relaxed, more social with his keepers. He spent long stretches resting near the fence where Walter sat. Visitors noticed it without understanding why. They only knew that the lion there seemed peaceful. On a crisp morning, weeks later, Walter sat on his bench with a cup of coffee warming his hands. Leo lay opposite him, eyes half closed, breathing slow and deep. There were no cameras, no crowds, just the soft sounds of a place learning how to be quiet again. Nothing dramatic happened, and that somehow felt like the most important lesson of all that day. Didn't he teach the world that lions are safer, that rules don't matter, or that love conquers danger without cost? It taught something simpler and harder to accept, that what we give to another, being time, care, presence, doesn't vanish just because years pass or walls are built. It stays. It waits, and sometimes, when everything else falls apart, it runs straight toward you and reminds you who you've always been to each other. Some stories stay with us because they are dramatic. Others stay because they are true in a way that reaches deeper than logic. This was the second kind. What happened between Walter Hayes and Leo was not a miracle in the cinematic sense. There was no magic, no fantasy, no sudden rewriting of nature's rules. There was only something far more unsettling and far more beautiful. There was memory, there was choice, there was a bond that had been formed quietly, patiently, without witnesses, and then revealed in the most public, terrifying moment imaginable. The lesson the world learned that day was not that wild animals should be treated like pets, or that danger can be ignored. The lesson was more uncomfortable than that. It was that relationships matter even when we pretend they don't, even when time passes, even when walls are built, even when the world insists that what you gave was temporary and therefore forgettable. Walter saved Leo when no one was watching, and for more than 20 years he continued to show up without reward, without recognition, without certainty that it mattered. Most people would have stopped. Most people would have told themselves it was pointless. But love, real love, does not require proof to continue. It only requires commitment. Leo, for his part, taught us something we are often reluctant to admit, that animals are not empty vessels of instinct alone. They remember safety. They remember kindness. They remember who stood between them and fear when they were powerless, and when the world shattered around him, when alarms screamed and humans ran. Leo did not choose violence. He chose the one presence that had once meant survival. This story reminds us that compassion is never wasted, that the smallest, quietest acts may be the ones that echo the longest. Walter did not know, as he wrapped a dying cub in his coat decades earlier, that he was shaping a moment that would one day stop hundreds of people in their tracks. He was simply doing what felt right, and that is often how the most powerful legacies are born. There is also a harder lesson here, one about patience, about showing up even when nothing seems to change, about trusting that love does not need immediate returns to be real in a world obsessed with instant results. This story whispers a different truth. Some things grow slowly and visibly and reveal themselves only when they are needed most. And finally, it teaches us humility. It reminds us that we do not fully understand the inner worlds of others, human or animal, and that certainty can be the enemy of compassion. The day fear took over the zoo, it was not force that restored calm, it was connection. If this story moved you, it is because somewhere inside you recognize that truth. You know that kindness matters, that presence matters, that the bonds we form, especially with those who cannot speak for themselves, shape who we are far more than we realize. This is why stories like this deserve to be told. Here at this channel, we believe in sharing animal stories that inspire, heal, and remind us of the quiet power of compassion. Stories that restore faith not just in animals, but in humanity itself. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe. Every new subscriber helps us continue bringing you meaningful animal stories like this one, stories that stay with you long after the video ends, because sometimes the world doesn't need louder voices, it needs deeper stories.